about a second term of Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Let's bring in former counselor to the man that the media is so afraid of, Fox News contributor Kellyanne Conway. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
They'll also say that he is the biggest threat to democracy that anybody has ever seen. They just won't stop.
They won't stop. They are like robots with 4 buttons, maybe 2 at this point. And I think you can almost hear low battery every time they open their mouths. Look, if I was Adam Schiff and the rest of them, I wouldn't want to bring up Russia collusion again. I don't want people to forget that ever happened. The phony media, they got their Pulitzers over it. They're still looking for it. But it does tell you something about the way they're running this election. Biden's polling numbers have never been worse. Trump's polling numbers have ever been better. And part of it is because Trump and Biden are focused on Trump and the policy prescriptions. And really what Trump wants people to do is just compare your life under the 2 presidencies. He was going to put his policies and presidency against Biden's. And the left doesn't know how to handle that because they need to make it about politics of personal destruction. They need everything to be about abortion, abortion, abortion. January 6th is the date on their calendar. Every time they open their phone or look on the wall, it says the same thing. But that's not going to amount to a winning coalition when Joe Biden's biggest problem in the polls right now is among his own base. So the obsession over Trump's base, Trump's base. Trump doesn't just have his base right now, he has a base plus. If he's beating Biden in the 7 swing states in mainstream media polling, mainstream media does not want him back. It tells you it's not just a base, it's base plus. Biden, on the other hand, has base minus. He doesn't have all the young people, all the voters of color, all of the women, all of the self-identified independents who he needs to scaffold together that tender coalition to get him back in the White House.
It's interesting. Those lies would actually work if people didn't experience 4 years of Donald Trump. He didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton, and he could have.
He didn't execute anybody. I mean,
he didn't execute anybody. But he gave power back to states and to people. He didn't consolidate power in Washington, D.C. But I want to get your take on this, Kellyanne, because it looks like this liar didn't learn his lesson. Congressman Adam Schiff, who's actually running for the Senate, still running his mouth about Russia collusion, despite being censored by the House earlier this year for spreading the notorious misinformation.
Yeah, so Schiff posting this on X, quote, "Today it was reported that a binder with top secret information on Russian election interference vanished under Trump's watch. That classified information still hasn't been found, demonstrating once again Trump's utter disregard for our national security."
We can see he's doing very poorly in the race for the Senate. And there it is. He's a one-note Adam. And if you remember how disgracefully he acquitted himself in those hearings when he did the whole hyperbolic opening where he was impersonating Donald Trump and then really just lying on the record, off the record. And for Adam Schiff to raise Russia collusion again would be like the people who got their Pulitzers over it wanting you to remember how phony this all was. But it's not going to work. And it's not going to work because people are very frustrated and a little bit desperate in this country economically. Yeah. And they are focused on what will improve their lives and who will improve their lives. So Trump's talking about policies, pretty much been on message of late. And they're talking about Trump. I think that policy will win the day. I saw your segment with Steve Moore, and you've been talking about economy, whether it's affecting people in your home state of Wisconsin, Sean. I think that's really important because Wisconsin is a state that Trump won by 0.4 of a percentage point in 2016. Biden won it by 0.7 of a percentage point in 2020. Yeah. It is so close. It's where the convention is next year. I think the other telltale sign in these polls, which is why the left is going so crazy, is that Trump did better after he was indicted. So, as I like to say, if you're ever given the choice to be indicted or not indicted, always pick door number 2. Nobody wants to be indicted. But it has helped him be seen as a victim of politically motivated prosecution and persecution. Last point, the people in the media that you played the clips, they were embarrassed in 2016.
Yes,
Not a single one of them lost their jobs for being so chronically, achingly wrong, laughably wrong about the presidential election. And they've had 8 years to get rid of him and just can't do it. They can't seem to just get rid of Donald Trump. They're going to be embarrassed again.
Do they have polling that works on this, Kellyanne?
No.
They must be doing it so they're just throwing it out there, hoping
it's history will judge and dignity and morality. And
so there's no polling that would back up that this is actually going to work against the former president.
They are very transparent about what they're trying to do. I mean, the press secretary tells you everything's better. Prices are down. Right. Inflation is under control.
Meantime, to bring it back to the first point that we were making, they're telling him, stop saying Biden Bidenomics, because people are thinking about socialism when they think about Bidenomics, and it's not working for you.
It's not working. And David Axelrod this week said, what in the world was Biden doing next to a sign that says Bidenomics again? We thought they were, if you've got Axelrod and James Carville, two men who helped elect presidents, actually know how to win, ringing the alarm bells, and they just don't know what to do with Kamala. Now, of course, she's at odds with her boss, the President of the United States, over Palestinians and I guess how to win back young people. But she's absent because they don't feel comfortable putting her out there on everything. They give her a Russian title czar for everything under the sun. She underperforms, and she's part of this ticket. Last point, that Hunter Biden, I think this was very important, the progress in the Hunter Biden investigation and the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden this week. Why? Because this country has never had a legitimate opportunity as voters to tell us how they feel about the Biden corruption in the family. Joe Biden lied about it in 2020. He looked in the camera at that debate against Donald Trump and he said, I've never discussed business with my son. He's my son. I love him. He's recovering. I'm proud of him. 51 intelligence officers have said that laptop has the earmarks of Russian disinformation. So he lied about all that. We know the truth now, and the truth is baked into some of these Biden polling numbers. People are very concerned about what they don't know about the Biden family, and it plays to the worst instincts that people have about Washington, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
We got to run, but I find it interesting that the split between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on Palestine and Israel, they're down by 10 points in Michigan.
Definitely.
A lot of Muslims voters in Dearborn, and I think they're trying to play it both ways here. I don't know if they can do it.
They may sit it out, right?
They've been trying, but actually his comments the other day attacking Benjamin Netanyahu and the government and saying that there should be a two-state solution, which, by the way, the Palestinians are always the ones to reject, really showed me where he stands on this issue, which is why I said in the beginning, what does it mean when he says that we stand with Israel? Do we really? Because I'm not sure.
It's a great question. You know, the White House that I was in, we always heard these words: chaos, crisis, chaos in a tweet, crisis in the Oval. Yep. We have chaos and crisis everywhere we look now. In the Middle East, at the border, everywhere we look, in our communities. So.
Kellyanne, if you'd come back and dispense this wisdom to us again, we would love that.
Let's go.
Thank you for joining us.
I'll be back. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.